Erev Tov. It is Wednesday night. Thanks to everyone who was able to make it tonight, as we deferred a couple of days on account of Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. And now we turn our attention to the Shabbos, which is not far away, and the Parshat Shavua or Parshiot Shavua of Achrei Mot-Kedoshim. And Rabbi Golden has a wonderful survey of um, the commentaries and the analyses of the Sa'ir Hamishtaleach, the goat which is sent away. Um, and we're going to dive right in. So I'll share my screen. The sent goat. And yet again, this time pretty early on, we're going to see reference to chukim, inexplicable laws, which Rabbi Golden has, identified a number of ones that we've already seen just in a few parshiot of Vayikra. So we start with the context. God commands Moshe to instruct his brother Aharon concerning the sanctuary service to take place on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar year. At the beginning of Parshat Acharei Mot, chapter 16 of Vayikra, details that service. And I will pause just to note that I'm just coming now from the Shiva house of Elliot Schwartz, Zichrono Livracha, and one of the beautiful dimensions of the Hespedim, of the eulogies that were shared about him in his honor, was one part of his daughter Shalhebet's Hesped, in which she talked about he was a Shaliach Tzibor on the Yamim Noraim, and the Yom Kippur Musaf and the Avoda service that was part of it was really a highlight of the year for him. And he really, as the Kahal read through the liturgical poem, the piyut that sort of describes the service, he would narrate, whisper into his daughter's ear, kind of everything that was happening. And he was just deeply understanding of and connected to the tradition, and the sort of um, extraordinary ritual dance almost of the Kohen Gadol on this day is something he was fond of. And so thinking of him and his connection to that um, as we talk about Vayikra chapter 16, which is the Torah's description of that service. And so at the center of this Yom Kippur service, Rabbi Golden continues, lies the mysterious ritual of the Sa'ir HaMishtalech, the sent goat. And now we're quoting from the Psukim, and from among the children of Israel, he, that's Aharon, shall take two he-goats as a sin offering, etc., and stand them before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Aharon shall place lots upon the two he-goats, goralot in Hebrew, one lot for the Lord and one lot for Azazel. And Aaron shall bring near the he-goat upon which the lot for the Lord has been drawn, and shall make it a sin offering. And the he-goat upon which the lot for Azazel has been drawn should be stood alive before the Lord to effect atonement upon it, to send it to Azazel in the wilderness. Further in the Parsha, the text continues. This is in the same chapter. And Aharon will place his two hands upon the living he-goat, and shall confess upon it all of the iniquities of the children of Israel, and all of their rebellious sins, and all of their sins. And he shall place them upon the head of the he-goat, and he shall send it at the hand of a designated man, Ish Iti, the Torah calls him, to the wilderness. And the he-goat shall bear upon it all of their iniquities to a desert land, Eretz Gezerah, and he shall send the he-goat into the wilderness. So the questions. How are we to understand this strange, even troubling ritual of the sent goat, which serves as the centerpiece of the service on the holiest day of the year, at the holiest spot on earth, under the direction of the Kohen Gadol, acting as the representative of the entire nation? The questions are manifold. What is the significance of the simultaneous selection of two goats? This question becomes even more intriguing in light of the Mishnaic dictate, right? There's a lot more expansion, embellishment, or details. Oh, pardon me a moment. What was that? Okay. Um, the rabbinic literature expands greatly on what the Torah describes in, just 20 something psukim. The whole tractate of Masechet Yoma and Mishnah and the entire tractate of Gemara develops and delves into what this service was, right? So the Mishnah goes on to say that the goats should be as similar as possible in stature and appearance, not just that there are two, but they're meant to be essentially identical. Why are lots drawn to determine the fate of each goat? Why not simply designate without resorting to a ceremony of chance? What's the implication of the confession uttered by the Kohen Gadol over the sent goat on behalf of the entire nation? What role does this confession play in the atonement of Yom Kippur? Isn't atonement a private, personal process, best experienced individually rather than communally? Note, these questions will be dealt with in the following study. Above all, the very concept of the Seir HaMeshtalech itself raises a series of troubling concerns. Are the sins of the people truly transferred to the head of the goat, as the text seems to indicate? Does the animal really become a ritual scapegoat for our sins? Such an idea seems completely antithetical to Jewish law and its prohibition of all superstitious practice. Over and over again, the Torah speaks of the doctrine of personal responsibility. We're each responsible for our actions, good or bad. Atonement for sins can only be effected through a wrenching process of tshuva, return, which entails recognition of past transgressions, remorse over those transgressions, and a commitment to future change. To suggest now that the tshuva process can somehow be short-circuited through a magical act of transference of sin seems to fly in the face of all that we believe.
No, no,
What's that, Peter?
no, I'm just saying I'm agreeing with
Yes,
that.
yes. Okay,
It's,
good.
it's
Ratifying the questions. Good. There are more. He
yeah.
continues. Furthermore, where is this goat being sent? What is the definition of the term Azazel? Why does the Torah mandate that a portion of this ritual be performed off of the Temple Mount? To whom or to what is this animal being offered? It seems totally inconceivable that Jewish tradition, founded on the absolute principle of a single unified God, could suddenly embrace a ritual including an off-site offering to another unknown force. So, approaches. The Talmud identifies the Seir Mishtalech as a classic legal mystery, one of 5 halachic phenomena that earn Satan's scorn due to their illogical nature. So this is something we are kind of mocked almost because it seems so illogical. The rabbis themselves seem to acknowledge that. From this perspective, the sent goat ritual is a clear example of a chok, a law for which no reason is given in the Torah. Once we enter the realm of chukim, this Talmudic source concludes, any attempt at real understanding is pointless. We are challenged instead to observe the law even when, or perhaps particularly when, the law's purpose remains elusive. I, the Lord, have established these laws, and you have no right to question them. That's a quote from the Gemara. Other rabbinic sources, however, while accepting the sent goat ritual's classification as a chok, nevertheless find value in the struggle to understand. A review of their search for answers will take us on a journey to the extremes of rabbinic opinion, from the mystical to the rational. Some of the suggestions offered will seem radical. One classical opinion will venture, in fact, so dangerously close to the edge of acceptability that its proponent will record it only in code, lest it be misinterpreted by those unready to read it. The potential lessons that can be gleaned, however, from the struggle to understand the central Yom Kippur rite make the journey more than worthwhile. First, however, a historical note underscoring the depth of the problems. Later events may well reflect the dangers of misinterpretation associated with the sent goat ritual. The Mishnah records that centuries after the inception of the ritual, Babylonian Jews attending the temple service, the Talmud corrects this to the Alexandrian Jews, began to pull at the hair of the individual accompanying the sent goat and shout, "Take our sins and leave! Take our sins and leave!" Uncomfortable with the desecration of the temple service resulting from the people's literal interpretation of the sent goat ritual, the rabbis mandated the construction of an elevated pathway leading from the temple grounds to the outskirts of Jerusalem. The goat was then led on this pathway out of the reach of onlookers. These developments only serve to strengthen our previously raised questions. What explanations can be offered for a ritual which, at face value, seems to contradict so many basic principles of Jewish belief? Our analysis best. Oh, Peter, yes?
Yeah, I just somewhere in the back of my head is the what I've heard that the goat was not just taken to a high place and made to be thrown off so he could not return. So that goat was sent to his oblivion by jumping off a cliff.
Yes. Yes, that is a rabbinic interpretation. Rabbi Golden will reference it later. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Good. Okay, so our analysis best begins, perhaps, Rabbi Golden says, with an attempt to define the term Azazel. Who or what does this word, describing the ultimate destination of the sent goat, signify? The broadest consensus among the authorities develops around the definition of Azazel as a geographic location, right? It's the Torah says you send it La Azazel Hamidbara, to the wilderness, to Azazel. So that could mean that Azazel is a place in the wilderness, or it could mean something different. We're going to see the Ramban's interpretation later that it's not a place, but a different thing that um, the goat is being sent to. But okay, the predominant opinion is that it's a geographic location. Numerous scholars, including Rashi, adopt the Tannaitic position that the word Azazel, built on the root word az, strong or bold, connotes a wilderness site of exceptional strength and harshness, right, to the harshest place of the wilderness, La Azazel Hamidbara. The goat, they maintain, and here's Peter's point, was led to a desolate mountain in the wilderness where it met its fate, falling over the edge of a sharp precipice.
Right.
What possible reason, however, could there be for this procedure? If the sent goat was to be a sacrifice, why was it not offered in the usual manner on the Temple Mount? Prominent among the rationalists concerning the Siri Mishtaleach is, of course, the Rambam, who, as is his wont, offers an intellectual philosophical explanation for this strange ritual. This scholar notes a general pattern in connection with the sin offerings offered as part of the temple ritual. Unlike burnt offerings, which are consumed in the fire of the sanctuary's altar, sin offerings brought as atonement for severe transgressions are burned outside the Israelite camp. Okay, right? So burnt offerings and olah goes entirely consumed on the altar, but a chatat of certain kinds actually is taken outside the camp to burn it. This ritual distinction, the Rambam suggests, mirrors a deeper philosophical divide. Far from creating the symbolic sweet savor to God of the celebratory burnt offerings, the burning of a sin offering reflects the destruction of the negative. Through this ritual, the supplicant makes known his desire that the sin which necessitated the sacrifice be erased, destroyed, and eradicated from memory, right? So the olah, you're sort of giving yourself over or something over entirely to God. The chatat is meant to somehow symbolize eliminating sin or the cause of sin. And therefore, the Torah therefore mandates that specific sin offerings be consumed not on the altar but outside of the camp. Atonement can only be achieved if the people distance themselves from the sins associated with the burning of these offerings. This is all the Rambam's analysis. When it comes to the Seir HaMishtaleach, the Rambam continues, our tradition goes one step further. So severe are the year-long communal sins represented by this offering that it is sent as far from the camp as possible. Right? Sometimes it's just outside the Temple Mount, just outside Jerusalem, but here it's all the way out into the wilderness, the furthest possible distance, to the desolate wilderness of Azazel. Above all, concludes the Rambam, the Torah's reference to the placing of the sins of the nation on the Seir HaMishtalech cannot be taken literally. Sins are not physical burdens which can be removed from one man's back and placed on the back of another. Rather, the drama of the scent goat ritual is designed to strike fear and awe in the hearts of onlookers and move them towards the difficult task of personal tshuva. The message of the ritual is clear. As the goat embarks on its final journey into the distant wilderness, symbolically accompanied by the sins of the people, all present should cleanse and distance themselves from past failures and transgressions by committing themselves to concrete future change. Other commentaries, okay, so that's the Rambam sort of saying this is a chatat offering, and it's the one that's for the most extreme communal year-long sin, so it has to be sent the furthest distance away. And it's not that it's actually carrying our sins away, but it is helping us recognize how far we have to distance ourselves from our wrongdoing, in order to really do an effective tshuva. Other commentaries suggest additional educational layers to the rituals surrounding the Seir HaMishtaleach. Haktav HaKabbalah, for example, references a phrase concerning idolatry that appears later in Parshat Achrei. And they shall no longer slaughter their offerings to the demons, literally the he-goats, after whom they stray. Idolatrous practice at the time. Look for that. Look for that pasuk in this week's parsha. Idolatrous practice at the time included the worship of wilderness demons, which often took the form of goats. The dramatic destruction of the scent goat is thus designed to convey to the nation the emptiness and the abhorrent nature of idol worship. As the people witness the graphic, violent end of the scent goat, The detritus of idolatry will dissipate from their souls, and they will cleave to their Creator. By prompting the nation to return to their God, maintains Haktava Kabbalah, the Seir Mishtalech will thus functionally bear upon it all of their iniquities, right? So it's not that they're actually transferring their sins, it's that um, there was a kind of idol worship of wilderness goat demons, and by taking that kind of thing and sort of smashing it, the people will distance themselves from idolatry and therefore, put aside their wrongdoings, and in that sense, seeing that um, carries off their sins. Moving in a different yet equally rational direction, the Abravanel, the Akedat, Yitzchak, and others view the rituals surrounding the Seir Mishtalech as symbolic of the eternal struggle between two twin brothers, Yaakov and Esav, and their progeny. These two towering historical figures emerge from the same womb at the same time. One brother, however, is fated to serve the Lord as the ancestor of his chosen people, while the other is destined to a violent, turbulent existence. So too, two goats, preferably of equal stature and appearance, although of course we don't have the sense that Yaakov and Esav were actually identical in this, they're not described the same way, certainly. But they were twins. Um, so too, two goats, preferably of equal stature and appearance, are selected during the temple service on Yom Kippur. Through the drawing of lots, God's will is evidenced as their fates are determined. One goat is chosen to ascend the temple's altar as a holy sacrifice, while the other is sent to its destruction in a wild, desolate, barren land. From this perspective, the ritual of the sent goat is specifically fashioned to remind the Israelites, on the holiest day of the year, of their unique destiny and responsibility as the descendants of Yaakov, God's chosen people. Finally, perhaps the most obvious pshat-based explanation for the ritual of the Seir Mishtaleach is further offered by the Abravanel and the Akedat Yitzchak, and elaborated upon extensively by Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. The rituals within the sanctuary on Yom Kippur reflect a fundamental truth central to the very fabric of creation. In order to afford man with free choice, for every good God creates, God necessarily fashions a concomitant evil. The challenge facing each individual witnessing the dramatic ritual of the sent goat is dramatically clear. Which path will you choose? Will you dedicate your life to the sanctified worship of the Lord? Will you ascend God's altar? Or will you, God forbid, allow your base impulses to lead you down the destructive path to Azazel? Right. So whereas the Abravanel and Akedat Yitzchak sort of say it, these two different ones are meant to highlight that we are the good one and not the bad one, the Yaakov and not the Esav. The further development here by Abravanel and Yitzchak really makes it more like you have to choose. You could actually be either one, and you decide which one you are. Not realize that you are a descendant of Yaakov and therefore you have to, own that and earn that, but realize that you could make either choice and make the right choice. At the opposite end of the interpretive spectrum from the rationalists are those who approach the entire ritual of the Seir Mishtalech in mystical midrashic terms. Many of their suggestions, however, seem to raise serious philosophical difficulties. Rabbi Golden has told us already that he's a Pashtan. He prefers the plain sense interpretation, so he's going to, say, yes, I'll show you these other ones, but they may, create more questions than answers. One tradition in the Talmud and Midrash, for example, links the Yom Kippur temple ritual to a most puzzling passage in the Torah, found towards the end of Parshat Bereshit. At the close of a 10-generation genealogical table leading from Adam to Noach, and immediately before the announcement of God's decision to punish the world through the great flood, the text states, "And it came to pass, when man began to multiply upon the face of the earth," at the end of Parshat Bereshit, "and daughters were born to them, and the sons of the gods," alternatively sons of the rulers, Bnei HaElohim, "saw that the daughters of man, Benot HaAdam, were good, and they took for themselves as wives from whomever they chose. The giants were upon the land in those days and also afterward, when the sons of gods or the sons of rulers consorted with the daughters of man who bore to them. They were the mighty, who from old were men of name, Anshe Shem." Clearly, this baffling passage calls for a full analysis which is beyond the scope of our current study. And it looks like he must not have done it back in Parshat Breshit either, or he would have referenced his own essay, so he didn't choose to deal with it there. Suffice it to say, numerous interpretations, again from the rational to the mystical, are offered by the commentaries. One approach to the text, however, recorded in the Talmud and Midrash, identifies the sons of gods, meaning the Bnei HaElohim, from all the way back in the beginning of Breshit, as Aza and Azael. In other sources, Shem Chazeh and
Oh,
Azael, two angels who convince God to send them into the corruption of human society in order to prove their own steadfastness. Upon their descent to earth, however, these angels immediately rebel against God's will and in the process introduce further sexual licentiousness into human experience, right? That's these B'nai HaElohim taking the Benot HaAdam, the daughters of man, and taking them as wives or as however they chose. The temple offerings on Yom Kippur, and particularly the Sa'ir HaMishtaleach, are offered to atone for the sins of these angels, right? Note the similarity between Azael and Azazel, and the subsequent sexual immorality that has followed across the centuries. Among the unanswered problems raised by this midrashic tale is the portrayal of angels as independent beings with free choice. This depiction directly contradicts Judaism's general understanding of angels as messengers of God with no free will of their own. See his
right.
essay on Breshit on Vayetze. An explanation perhaps emerges if we view this midrash in figurative rather than literal terms. The rabbis use midrashic technique to underscore the grave dangers surrounding potential sins of a sexual nature. So great are the temptations that even angels can ultimately fall prey, and so pervasive is the problem in the human sphere that the central temple ritual on Yom Kippur is dedicated to the atonement of such sins. This midrash finds support not only in the many laws within Jewish tradition designed to prevent sexual offenses, but also in a Yom Kippur practice which continues to this day. The Torah portion chosen for recitation on Yom Kippur afternoon is specifically the section from Parshat Achrei that catalogs the Torah's prohibitions of sexual immorality. Right, so there's some kind of connection between them that this interpretation is building upon or is harmonizing with. Okay, another midrashic approach to the Seir HaMishtalech is so potentially explosive that one of its scholarly proponents is only willing to allude to it in code. After outlining a number of ideas concerning this mysterious ritual, the Ibn Ezra makes the following baffling statement. If you have the ability to decipher the secret that is found after the word Azazel, you will know its secret and the secret of its name, and I will reveal a small portion of the secret in a riddle. When you are 33 years old, you will know it. A brief, reassuring message to those readers who are 33 years old or older and do not understand this declaration. Don't worry, you are in good company. Scholars across the ages have struggled to break the Ibn Ezra's code. Among the many solutions offered, the most widely accepted is that of the Ramban, who, tongue in cheek, opens his explanation as follows. Behold, Rabbi Abraham Ibn Ezra is a trustworthy soul who keeps a secret, and I am the talebearer who will reveal his secret. For it really is no secret. Our rabbis have already revealed it on many occasions. The Ramban goes on to disclose the key to the Ibn Ezra's riddle. If you count 33 sentences in the text, from the first mention of the word Azazel, you arrive at a statement that we have already encountered in this study. And they shall no longer slaughter their offerings to the demons, literally the he-goats, after whom they stray. Apparently, the Israelites actively worshipped demons, angels, and other perceived supernatural forces. The Torah therefore expressly prohibits this pointless veneration. Angelic or demonic forces are not independent entities worthy of worship. They are simply manifestations of God's will. As the Ramban continues his analysis of the Ibn Ezra, however, it becomes abundantly clear why the latter might have been hesitant to openly state his position. There is, it seems, an exception to the rule prohibiting gifts to supernatural forces other than God. Here we quote from the Ramban. On Yom Kippur, however, the Blessed Holy One commanded that we send a goat to the wilderness, to the force that rules in desolate places, and from whose power devolves bloodshed, warfare, violence, strife, and destruction, and under whose authority are the demons referred to by the rabbis as mazikim, destroyers, and in the biblical text as sirim, he-goats. Recognizing the startling nature of his own words, the Ramban immediately explains that the Sa'ir Mishtaleach is by no means to be understood as an independent offering of our own initiative to this force of the wilderness. Such an act would be totally contrary to Torah law and thought, an open contradiction of our belief in one unified God. The gift to Azazel must instead be viewed as fulfillment of God's will, best compared to a gift of food given by the supplier of a banquet to a servant at the host's request. The supplier grants nothing directly to the servant, nor does he honor the servant at all. All substance and honor is given only to the host through adherence to the host's directives. So too we send the goat to Azazel only in fulfillment of God's command. This approach, maintains the Ramban, also explains the use of lots in the selection between the two goats. Had the Kohen chosen the goat to be sent to Azazel, it would have been as if he were worshipping the force of the wilderness and offering directly in its name. The ritual as outlined in the Torah, however, calls for both goats to be stood before the sanctuary. Both animals are offerings to God, who then makes God's will known through the drawing of lots. God, not the Kohen, determines the fate of each of the offerings. God selects the gift for Azazel. In spite of the Ramban's earnest attempts to buffer the blow, however, his explanation of the Ibn Ezra's approach to the Seir HaMishtalech strikes with unsettling force. How can we accept a Torah mandate that not only treats angels as independent powers, but enjoins us to extend a gift to one such power on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar year? Even if the bequest to Azazel is indirect, this sanctuary ritual seems to undermine the very essence of our belief in one and only one heavenly force. Perhaps, once again, a solution lies in finding the moral message embedded at the core of this mysterious approach. Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, carries one overarching imperative: tshuva, return, or to be more specific, positive behavioral change. Commitment to such change, however, is doomed to failure without a fundamental recognition of the power of evil and sin. Year after year, the best of intentions eloquently expressed over the high holidays fall prey to the temptations of the real world. Our high expectations for ourselves, forged in the rising emotional tide that crests with the cadences of Ne'ilah, the dramatic closing Yom Kippur prayer, are soon dashed against the shoals of everyday pressures that inevitably stunt our spiritual growth. Our tradition thus attempts to forestall this eventuality through the message of the sent goat. A gift is given to the destructive force of the desert in an apparent effort to direct the power of even that force towards our betterment. And through this symbolic act, a powerful personal message is conveyed to all present. Do not let this holiest of days pass without attaining a healthy respect for the potentially destructive forces that inhabit your world. Above all, recognize the strength of your own personal Yetzer Hara, your evil inclination, and its unerring ability to undermine your valiant attempts at self-betterment. Denial of its existence has not worked for you in the past and will not work for you in the future. Attempted sublimation of the Yetzer Hara is in fact the surest way to grant it greater power over your actions. Adopt therefore a different tack. Acknowledge your adversary, respect its strength, then turn that strength to your benefit. Channel the energy that could lead you astray and direct it towards good. The ritual of the Seir HaMishtalech thus emerges as a dramatic reiteration of a fundamental truth, which according to Jewish tradition is embedded in the fabric of the world's creation. No aspect of man's divinely created makeup is inherently evil. Good and evil are instead defined in concrete terms by how our potential is used. The very internal forces that are so often destructive, lust, ambition, the drive for control and power, can, when properly acknowledged, controlled, and harnessed, lead us to the greatest good and accomplishment. In our search for a proper life path, Azazel can and must become our ally. Again, he fully acknowledges this is a figurative interpretation. The Ramban seems to be saying more literally that we do offer a once a year offering to the destructive forces of the wilderness. Points to ponder, much shorter than usual. Our analysis of the scent goat ritual underscores a fundamental truth concerning Torah study, which cannot be stated often enough. Even the most difficult, esoteric concepts within our tradition can, upon diligent study, yield extraordinary lessons of immediate relevance to our lives. The treasures of meaning are there for the taking. All that is required is the will and the energy. Right? So what we got a chance to see, just a quick review. We don't need the screen for this. Just a quick review. We asked many questions about the ritual of the sent goat, the Sa'ir La'azazel, about why it's twins, why there are lots, why it's sent out to the wilderness, so not done at the Temple Mount, um, etc. And we noted that over time the ritual has developed and and changed in various ways. We talked about the idea that on face value it does appear to be a chok because its reasons are not given and it seems mysterious to us. And so one approach is just leave it be and do it. And other approaches are, okay, we still have to do it, but let's try at least to understand. We saw the idea that Azazel might just be a geographic location, that it might refer to the harshest place in the wilderness, and that might be a hint to the idea that it was actually pushed off or allowed to fall off the edge of a cliff. We talked about the idea of it being so far outside the camp as indicative of the fact that as a sin offering, it's really teaching us about, distancing ourselves from our sins as a necessary dimension of tshuva, and that it doesn't actually bear our sins, but symbolically shows us that we are supposed to send our sins away, not by dismissing them, but by distancing ourselves from them, by recognizing that we don't want to have them. Um, and then we saw the idea of the connection between the two goats to evoke Yaakov and Esau. First, we saw the interpretation that because goat demon wild goat wild wilderness goat demon worship was a kind of idolatrous practice at the time, that maybe if that's the paradigm of distancing yourself from God, so kind of pushing away something that's representative of that is a way of expressing the desire to return to God. Then we came back to the question of the two goats, and we saw the comparison to Yaakov and Esav, and then it's meant to be a reminder that we are the people of Jacob, and therefore we should behave that way. Or without putting it in kind of national terms, but more individual terms, the choice always lays in front of us to be one goat or the other. And the consequences of those choices speak for themselves. Um, and then we shifted to the more mystical realm, one that these goats were the sons of gods that were sent down to earth and behaved inappropriately sexually. And so this is an atonement for the sins of those angels. Um, and then further on, we saw the Ibn Ezra's comment, which the Ramban explicated, seems to mean that in some way there actually is a true demonic force in the wilderness, and sacrificing to it in some way is about following God's will to acknowledge and try to placate that demon force. And then the more uh, palatable from a classical Jewish perspective approach, the sort of figurative interpretation approach, which is that this is about realizing that to successfully undergo a process of betterment and change, we have to not try to repress our urges to do the wrong thing, but recognize them, engage them honestly, and try to redirect them, but without, truly appreciating how real they are, we won't be able to be successful. Um, and that was his last line. In our search for a proper life path, Azazel, right, the darker elements within us can and must become our ally. So that's it. And this Shabbat, as you read through the Yom Kippur service in chapter 16, um, maybe we'll notice the details of this ritual and in what ways they speak to us,
Yes.
and we'll certainly see that passage about not sacrificing to the wilderness demons, and see what we make of it in its context there. And fascinating analysis. And again, I think he does such a lovely job of just summarizing. Somebody who wants to go into the details, the source references are there. We have, the classic commentaries, Rashi, Ibn Ezra, Ramban, and then we have some of the more modern, Hakatava, HaKabbalah, Kedat Yitzchak. We mentioned Rambam and More Nevuchim, all with their takes kind of written in a very smooth, seamless, digestible way. Um, I beg your indulgence tonight to end early. So happy to hear thoughts, questions, and reactions offline. But I'm just going to take the opportunity to check our calendar for next week, which is Monday, the 27th. Looks great to me. And hope to see everybody then. Happy to tell you all that this weekend we will be in Chicago, just myself and our eldest Ilan. For those who remember Rav Ari Hart, one of our exceptional rabbis on our rabbinic team, going back 7, 8 years and more. Um, Rav Ari's eldest son, Hodi, who is our Ilan's age and our Ilan's friend, celebrating his becoming a bar mitzvah this Shabbat. And Skokie and Ilan and I are headed out there to be part of the celebration. So
Oh, Mazel tov.
we'll miss those who we typically see on Shabbat, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody back on Zoom on Monday night.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You bet. Sorry to shortcut, but take good care. Much love to mom and dad, and Shabbat Shalom. Good night to all.
Thank you. Laila Tov.
That too.